Hey there, and welcome back to the Weight Loss Your Way podcast. This is the show that's all about helping women take control of their weight loss journey without having to go on restrictive diets or chase the latest fads. I'm Norma Frahn, and I'm a life coach and integrative nutrition health coach who's been where you are. I've lost over 100 pounds doing it my way. And in this podcast, I'll share with you my holistic approach to weight loss that considers your whole life, not just what you're putting on your plate. Let's make weight loss work for you on your terms and help you learn to love the life and the body that you live in. Together, we're going to go on a journey of becoming the best version of ourselves, one that loves ourselves at any size and no longer measures our self worth by the number on the scale or the size of our jeans. So, are you ready? Let's get into today's episode. All right. So, I want to jump into part two of my four-part series that's all about improving your relationship with food. But before we do that, just a quick reminder. If you haven't already grabbed the Weight Loss Your Way Getting Started guide, be sure you do that. Because the question all the time that I get is, well, how do I get started? And I know I share a lot of concepts and ideas here, but I realize that we often don't get into the how to. So I've created this guide that will help you get started. So it's really simple. There's just three foundational steps, like actionable things that you can take today that's going to put you on the path to weight loss your way. The guide is completely free and it comes with a really special bonus. Once you download the guide, you'll have 2 weeks of support and coaching directly with me via Voxer. So all you need to do is download the Voxer app, and it's a free app, and send me your questions and we'll work through them together that way. So I'm doing this because those three steps that I share in the guide, they're that important. Getting these three things down will be the foundation that you're going to build the rest of your process on. So I want to make sure you have every opportunity to experience success. So you can go and grab that guide today. The link will be in the show notes and you'll find it there. It's weightlossyourway.ck.page/guide. So head on down to the show notes and download that right away. All right. So, like I said, this is the second episode in a four-part series about improving your relationship with food. And if you haven't already, make sure you go back and listen to episode 39. Now, you don't need to do that to listen to this one. So don't like hang up this one and run right over there. But make sure that you do that at some point because it will all kind of work together when you hear all four of these as they come out. So here's a question for you. Have you ever thought about your relationship with food? Like the ones you have with like real living, breathing humans? I know it might sound a little weird, but if you think about it, how much time do you spend thinking about food? Maybe more than you spend thinking about some of the people in your life. So it really is a relationship, right? And then how do you comfort yourself when you're feeling sad or anxious or bored or lonely or heck, even happy? And is food maybe your secret friend and it shows up to hang out with you when you find yourself alone and no one's watching? I had a food secret friend. So whether you're aware of it or not, you have a relationship with food right now. And just like the relationship with some people, it can be complicated. So, in today's episode, I'm going to share how you can start to shape that relationship into something that serves you instead of something that drains you and maybe even isolates you. Now, this can be tricky and maybe even a little triggering of a conversation. So, I want to acknowledge that before we go on. Everyone I work with is in a different place in terms of how they're thinking about weight loss, their body, their relationship with food. So I'm going to talk in generalities today and ask that you just hold it lightly and pick up the pieces that resonate with you and where you are right now. So your relationship with food is something that's actually been developing over your entire lifetime. It's been shaped by experiences, and those experiences have created some beliefs that are guiding your thinking today. And that's what makes it so complicated. Sometimes those beliefs are in direct conflict with each other, and they're in direct conflict with what you want to create in your life, like weight loss. Now, I believe you have to resolve some of those conflicts by changing your relationship with food first so that you can experience lasting, sustainable weight loss. And to do that, to really understand and change your relationship with food, you have to set aside dieting just for a little while you work this out. So, if you just heard me say that and you're thinking, well, wait a minute, this podcast is called Weight Loss Your Way. Well, you're absolutely right. And I did just say, I don't want you to focus on weight loss. That's also true, but stay with me. Let me explain what I mean. It's working on your relationship with food and pursuing weight loss are in direct conflict with each other. It's going to be extremely hard, if not impossible, to do them both at the same time. So let me give you a really, really common example. If you're someone that turns to food for emotional comfort, if you believe that food does provide that for you, and it very well may, if it's that sense of comfort and relief that you get from food, and you're trying to lose weight, which means you're probably restricting your food intake. So already, do you see the direct opposites? So when you're restricting your food and you're relying on food to provide you emotional support, in some cases, you may be restricting yourself from feeling the comfort and relief that you actually need. In those times of needing relief and holding yourself back from eating, you're operating on sheer willpower, which is actually creating more anxiety. And depending on how much your nervous system can tolerate, you'll almost always choose emotional comfort over weight loss. So, in that sense, emotional eating is actually a response to dieting. Do you see what I mean? Does that make sense? And then what happens when you do go off the diet and decide to eat? Maybe it's in response to emotions or for whatever reason. What happens next? Usually, the self loathing comes screaming in out of control. I can't believe I ate that. Here I go again, messing up another diet. Why can't I stop eating chocolate every time something goes wrong? And blah, 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 blah. It just goes on and on forever. So, do you see how the belief that food comforts you is in direct conflict with restricting your food? If you have that belief, you just can't rip the food out, which is the restricting part, and not replace it with something else that gives you the comfort that you need. Taking away the food actually creates more discomfort. So your work is not trying harder or having more willpower, which is usually the first thought we all have. It's dealing with the emotional need that food is filling for you. Or maybe said differently, changing the relationship you have with food and the emotional comfort and finding alternative ways to get that comfort. Because, being in discomfort sucks. It feels awful. So it's normal to want to push it away or push it down if that's how you've managed it before. Our brains want to keep us safe. In fact, that's the only job of certain parts of our brain, to seek pleasure, to avoid pain, and to keep us safe, but to do all three as efficiently as possible. So for some of us, food does all of that, even if it's just for a brief moment. You get the relief, which takes you out of discomfort. So it's normal that this is happening, and it's normal that it's going to take time to sort this out. So, do you see how now practicing that restrictive dieting while you're working on a better relationship with food can be problematic? I hope so. Because my goal for Weight Loss Your Way is that you actually stop dieting and focus your energy on the things that will change you on the inside, like the relationship you have with food, and learn different ways to meet your emotional needs rather than ignore them or try to push through with power so that you can lose weight in a way that's compassionate and kind and creates this a meaningful lifelong change. Sure, you can keep doing the restrictive diets and willpowering your way to a weight goal. I've done it more times than I can count. But what has really changed when you get to that magic number if all you've done is willpower your way there? Absolutely nothing. You still have the same emotions. You're still going to want food to manage them. You're still going to have to rely on willpower. And now you've probably got another problem. Now you're worried about how in the world you're going to keep from gaining the weight back. So it's just not a sustainable approach. What I'm suggesting is to do the inside work, like changing the relationship you have with food instead of dieting as you've always known it. This is the work that creates lifetime change, not short term fix my weight problem change. This is the work that will set you up to lose your weight and manage your emotional needs in a way that just doesn't always involve food. So imagine what it would be like if you learned a new way to cope with your emotions and comfort yourself that didn't always involve food. How much eating would you naturally eliminate? Not only would you be finding healthier ways to respond to your emotions, but you will likely lose weight without feeling restricted and full of anxiety. All right, that's a lot of concept. And I know you're wanting the how. So, how in the world do you do this? Well, I'm going to give you the first step today. It's a big one. And I'm not going to go any further than this first step because I don't want to overwhelm you. This is a big enough step and it's more than enough right now. The time you spend here is going to be well worth it. So stay with me. So remember in the beginning I said I'm speaking in generalities. So let's stay under this big broad umbrella of emotional eating or using food as a means of comforting yourselves. This may or may not be an issue for you, but it's probably the most common, the one that I see most often. So I'm pretty certain this will likely resonate with you. But like I said in the beginning, everyone's relationship with food is different. So that's why I'm going to stick with this kind of big umbrella of emotional eating or comforting yourself with food. There is an important point I want to make first, though, before I get into the how. The goal of improving your relationship with food is not to never eat in a response to an emotion again. That goal is impossible because you are human and humans are emotional beings. And sometimes you will eat just for the pure joy of it. The goal is to notice what emotions may be leading you to eating so that you can cope with them directly instead of turning to food, giving yourself an option. If you can figure out what those emotions are and what the triggers are, you now have options. So, because eating is a coping skill, it's a skill that you learned a very long time ago. But you want to get to the place that you're making a conscious choice as opposed to reacting to an emotion that you just aren't managing. And the most helpful thing you can do for yourself when you feel an emotion pull you towards food is to first acknowledge that you're having an emotional reaction to something. We're so quick to like push it down and not think about it or pay attention to it. But it's really important to say, yeah, here it is. I'm really feeling this. And you know what? I'm still safe. It's a feeling. So some emotions may feel very unsafe in your body, but acknowledging them and acknowledging that they're there and then telling yourself, I am safe goes a long way in calming your brain down and getting a little immediate relief. Now, when you are feeling an emotional response, it can be helpful to, like I said, acknowledge it by just putting one hand over your heart and maybe your other hand on your stomach and just take a deep breath and say out loud, you are safe. I've got you. And repeat it as many times as you need to. You will start to calm a bit. And then when you feel that calm come over you, you can start to think about what your other choices might be. Now, if you're ready to dig into the real work, which is awareness, this is the how to, the time you spend noticing and paying attention to the role food is playing in your life will be the most valuable time spent. And you may have heard me say this before because I know I say it all the time. Awareness is always the first step when you're trying to make change. You have to know where you're starting from in order to get to the place you're going. It's just like the GPS in your phone or in your car. The first thing it does is figures out where you are right now. So then it can map the best route forward. That's exactly what we're going to do with this first step to improving your relationship with food. So in this case, becoming aware means becoming an observer of yourself and your thinking. And I know that sounds kind of weird. When I do this work myself, I actually imagine I'm standing just behind myself and watching and taking it all in. So, what are you watching for? Well, think of it as getting to know your relationship with food, as watching for it. Look for patterns or clues that you can say, ah, yeah, there it is. That's what I do when I feel sad, or, yep, that's what I do when I feel frustrated. You can notice that you're reaching for food. Maybe it's in the late afternoon when your energy zapped and you kind of see that pattern emerging. Or when you put your kids to bed and flop down on the couch at the end of the day, probably the first time you sat down all day. Or when someone brings in fresh donuts to the office. And even if you had a great breakfast and you're not the least bit hungry, all you can do is think about those donuts. Those are the things I want you to watch for and notice and just pay attention to the fact that they're happening. Notice the situations or the interactions that trigger you to want to eat. Do you find yourself in the drive through after a particular tough day? That was me. Is there a specific activity that triggers the desire for a particular food? One of mine was fishing. I know, of all things, fishing. But whenever we'd go out for a day of fishing on the lake when the kids were younger, I'd always pack a big bag of trail mix. You know, the really good trail mix with the raisins and the peanuts and the M&Ms. And M's. And even after they were grown, and it's just my husband and I would still pack the trail mix. And if I don't, I spend the entire time wishing I had. There's something about being on that lake that triggers that craving for that trail mix. So that's what I mean. Notice those experiences that are drawing you to a specific food. Another really helpful thing to notice is what emotions you're experiencing when you do reach for the food. Try to name it, give it a label. Is it stress, frustration, sadness? Are you bored, happy, or lonely? Just notice what emotion is showing up to pay a visit. That is a great clue to understanding if you're using food as a way to cope with or distract you from a feeling that that emotion is bringing on. Now, if you really want to go one step further, notice what that emotion feels like in your body. What are the physical sensations you're feeling when you reach for food? Is it like, does your chest get tight? Do you feel tingly? Do you get hot or sweaty? Do you have a knot in your stomach? Is your jaw clenched? There's something physical that happens that we all do whenever we experience an emotion. And sometimes identifying that physical sensation is a clue. It's a really good clue. So when you feel it start to come up again, maybe even before you thought about the food, you're going to be able to say, whoa, that feels like stress. I think I need to just slow down a minute. Then you can ask yourself if some emotions are stronger than others. Are some very mild? Do some feel really urgent or unsafe? Getting to recognize the physical sensations an emotion brings over your body is going to help you start to normalize it a bit, which will make it easier to allow it to be there and eventually minimize the need to push it away or push it down with food. Now, the last suggestion I can give you in terms of really dialing into that awareness, think about what specific thoughts or notice what specific thoughts you have in that moment when you're ready to reach for the food. Are there some thoughts that seem to be trying to either talk you out of or talk you into eating? Are there more than one thought? And maybe they're both jockeying for position at the same time. You know that conversation like, "Yeah, eat the cookies, eat those cookies, you deserve it." And then there's this other voice that's going on in your head that says, "Oh, no, no, you know better. You've been so good, don't blow it." Listen for the chatter. That's what I like to call that. It's diet brain chatter that's happening. So pay attention to that, and I bet you're gonna find it happens more often than you think. The benefit of taking the time to notice all of this is that you get to know your behaviors and start to understand why they're there. And when you can do that, you can start to work with them instead of against them. Now, do you see what I mean about the relationship with food being really complicated? When you think about all of these things I just asked you to pay attention to, that's kind of complicated. So it's no wonder that this is the thing that challenges most of us. There's thoughts, there's feelings, there's emotions. They're all swirling around together. Some of them are in competition with each other. Others are jockeying for position all the time. And they're all just vying for your attention for a different reason. So think about it. There's never just one reason you turn to food. There's probably several. Because remember, It's because of past experiences and learned behaviors that your brain's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's trying to protect you and keep you safe. And if food has played a role in that for you, that's what your brain knows how to do. So, as complicated as this is, it's also completely normal. I just have to remind you of that again. So, if you're up for the challenge, your homework this week is to notice and become more aware of your behaviors and thoughts related to food and your emotions. I believe this is some of the most important work, if not the most important work you can do in weight loss your way, which is why I want you to focus only on this for now. And remember, if you're actively dieting, but you really want to come to terms with your relationship with food, consider setting the diet aside just for now so that you can have the space to really explore and objectively observe what your current relationship with food looks like without the distraction and the noise of dieting. That's what the tagline "Stop Dieting and Start Living" means on my website, if you've ever seen that. When you stop dieting and give yourself space to get to know you, you can start to open up a whole different world for yourself and actually live the life you want to live without diets. That's a lot, and that's what I have for you this week. All right. Thank you for listening to today's show. If something really resonated with you and you'd like to hear more about Weight Loss Your Way, become an insider and subscribe to my weekly email. The link's in the show notes. And one last thing, if you're enjoying the Weight Loss Your Way podcast, I would love it if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcast or on weightlossyourwaypodcast.com. On that website, you'll find all the past episodes and lots of other great information. So go check me out over there too. It would mean the world to me if you could leave that rating and review because it truly is the best way to get this podcast in front of more women just like you who are done with diets and ready to do it their way. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.